right, so marketing team. How's everybody doing today? Good. So today we're going to talk about a very important aspect of marketing, which is segmentation and some of the related concepts. So we're going to talk about segmentation, we're going to talk about market sizing, targeting, positioning. Very important concepts in marketing. So I want to start our discussion by defining what is segmentation. So segmentation is, when we say segmentation, what we're talking about is dividing a market into submarkets or into segments. This is chapter 9. Everybody follow what I'm talking about? When we talk about dividing a market into submarkets, we're going to take a large market and we're going to divide it into smaller segments. So any given market is going to be made up of a group of segments. So segmentation is dividing a market into smaller segments. And then once we do that, what we're going to do is quantify the size of those segments. We refer to that as market sizing. So right now I'm just giving you an overview. We're going to get into the details, but I want to give you the big picture as it relates to segmentation. So we segment the market into smaller segments, quantify the size of the segments, and then once we've quantified the segments, then what we need to do is select segments. So we have to target segments, specific segments that we want to penetrate. So we want to find, we want to identify segments to sell our product or service. And we need to do a market analysis to understand what segments are going to be more ideal versus other segments in the marketplace. And then we need to decide on how we're going to position our brand in the market. Because remember, we said all the products in a given category have the same generic functionality. Do you remember that? We said, for example, all cars provide the same generic functionality, which is?
Transportation.
Right, transportation. And what makes one car unique from another is that each car is wrapped in a brand. So we said the product is wrapped in a brand. And what's compelling about creating a perceptual map is that we're able to look at where our brand is positioned on two dimensions relative to our competition. So where we are positioned relative to our competition. So that's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk more specifically about segmentation when we're dividing a market into submarkets. So there's certain criteria that we have when we're segmenting a market. So when we're dividing a market into submarkets, or sometimes we phrase it another way, we talk about aggregating potential customers into groups, right? So that's another way to look at it. But however you could wrap your head around it is fine. Basically, it means the same thing. Either we're dividing the market into submarkets, or we're grouping customers, potential customers, together. So what we want to do ultimately is identify segments that are large. Now, it doesn't mean that a niche cannot be something that's desirable for us as an organization, but most often what we want to do is identify segments that are large, reachable. So when we identify a certain segment of, let's say, people who play golf. Well, that segment can be pretty large in the United States, but importantly, we could also reach golfers. We're able to reach them. But to say, for example, that our segment is people with purple hair, well, that could be interesting and something that we're fascinated by. Is that really a segment that's reachable? So golfers, we know. We know what programs they watch. We know what time they watch. They all read Golf Digest, for example. So when we talk about reachable, it means that we're able to communicate with them. We're able to communicate through advertising, for example. That's what we mean when we say they're reachable. So in other words, our marketing communications plan is something that they're able to view. Now, if we run an ad in Golf Digest, or we run an ad or a commercial during the time that there's golf being played, then aspiring golfers, as well as maybe some professional golfers, would have the opportunity to view either our TV commercial or our billboard. So that's what we mean by reach. Everybody's clear when we say that the segments need to be large and also reachable. So you might say, well, what does that mean, reachable? Reachable, so we could reach them, for example, with advertising. They have the opportunity to be exposed to our print ads, to our outdoor advertising, to our commercials, to our radio spots. If we can't reach them, that's a problem. You agree? You see why that creates a problem for us? Even though the market or the segment could be very large, if we don't have a way of communicating with them, then we don't have a way to create a favorable brand image, to build a level of brand awareness.
Customer relationship.
Right, develop a relationship with them. So the market needs to be large, reachable, and also the group that we're forming, the segment, must have similar needs and wants. So when we're aggregating these group of potential customers, when we're grouping them together, it's got to be a group of customers or potential customers that are going to have the similar needs and wants. Remember we talked about, we said one of the key marketing activities is identifying an unmet need. So we need to find out what their needs and wants are. So those that have similar needs and wants, so for example, those that have a need or a want for a high quality golf club, we group those together. So they have similar needs and wants. Large, reachable, with similar needs and wants. And importantly, there's a fourth component in terms of the criteria that we use in forming segments. You guys ready? The fourth criteria is that they will respond in a similar way to the marketing mix. What does that mean? What does that mean that we say that now that we've aggregated these group of potential customers, that one of the important criteria is that they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way? First of all, who could tell us what is the marketing mix? The 4 Ps. And what are they? What are the 4 Ps? Well, that was interesting. Your hands were doing like this, and his mouth was moving, right? That's good. You guys worked that out beforehand? That's amazing.
They rehearsed that.
They rehearsed that. You're doing that outside? So, product, price, place, promotion. So, in other words, when we set the price at a certain level, that means that customers, potential customers in that segment are going to buy. Or when we develop and run a particular commercial, that the people who see it are going to have a similar reaction, that it's going to get their attention, that it's going to create interest, that it's going to stimulate desire and get them to take action.
Would that be one of the concerns before you aggregate? And before you break it up into groups?
Right, that would be one of the concerns, is because remember we talked a lot about that we want to customize the marketing mix. We want to tailor the marketing mix to meet the needs of a particular segment. So when we have, let's say for example, all men. Okay, but are all men going to buy golf clubs at that price? See, that's what we're trying to determine. Are all men going to react the same way to a particular advertising commercial? Now we know in the US, for example, the US is very diverse. So there's people of different ethnic backgrounds. So you have in the given market, even if we take New York, you have African Americans, Caribbean Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, and so on and so on. So are they all going to respond to our commercial the same way? No. Are they all going to have the same reaction? No, so we need to anticipate that. So when we form a segment, we want it to be large, reachable, the members of the segment to have similar needs and wants, and more often than not, they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way. Not always, right? It's not perfect. It's not going to say every single person in that segment is going to respond the same. But ideally, why? Because that's going to be cost efficient for us. Questions? So one of the things we need to think about is, well, that being said, so we know what the criteria are. Who could tell us? What are the 4 criteria? Go ahead.
Okay, so the group must have similar needs and wants, and which they also have to be large and reachable,
right?
And they will respond to the marketing mix as like the same.
Right, in a similar way. So now that we know what the criteria is, the next thing is, well, how do we segment the market then? We know what we're trying to achieve, so we have the criteria. That's smart. We identify that first. What are the criteria? But then the question is, well, how do we go about segmenting a given market? So there's a number of ways that we could do that. So let me tell you what some of the key ways are first. Demographic segmentation, geographic segmentation, psychographic, and behavioral. Alright, so I'm going to tell you what each of those are, and then we're going to look at some examples. So what I've just shared with you is that some of the ways that we could segment a market, we said that means dividing a market into submarkets or segments, is demographic, geographic, psychographic, and behavioral. So a demographic segmentation means that what we do is we divide the market into segments based on, for example, gender, race, religion, education level, income, did I say age? Does it make sense? So those are types of demographic segmentation. So what we do is we group together, we aggregate potential customers based on their gender, let's say. So what that means is that we group together in a particular market all women and all men. And we see those as two distinct market segments. And the assumption is that each of those segments are large, they're reachable, they have similar needs and wants, and they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way. That's one example. What about age? So we could segment the market So what this suggests is that we believe that in each of these segments, right, based on each of these age groups, there are similar needs and wants, that they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way, that these age groups are reachable in a given market. Now, it doesn't need to be 18 to 25. Maybe our research says 18 to 35 and 36 to 55. Remember, what we're trying to do is group together potential customers into segments that are large, reachable, with similar needs and wants, and respond to the marketing mix in a similar way. So let me give you another example of what we mean when we say responds to the marketing mix in a similar way. So another example would be when we talk about place, when we talk about distribution. So in other words, if we say they respond to the marketing mix in a similar way as relates to place, might be that they do all their shopping online. Now that's a key takeaway. So when we think about whether or not this is a compelling segment, and we say it responds to the marketing mix in a similar way, that would be a really good example. So I don't want you to think, oh, what does that mean? Responds to the marketing mix in a similar way. Well, that would be a good example. That means that people in this age group, let's just say, they shop online. Now, that's very important because that means that we need to have a virtual store. This age group, an older age group, maybe they shop very little online. Maybe they shop only in department stores. We need to know that. We need to know that beforehand to make sure that we have distribution in department stores in that particular market. So it's not like conceptual, it has a very practical application when we talk about response to the marketing mix in a similar way. So that's an example of place, of distribution. And so these particular customers, potential customers, that's how we're going to distribute the product online.
I have an odd question, but to which...
I like odd questions.
To which segmentation variables or just segmentation group would like pregnant women?
I would say that's
Like
lifestyle, psychographic.
Psychographic? Thank you.
So it's a life stage, for example.
What if you have like sort of overlapping type of segments that ever happens something like that?
Yeah, but remember, we're the ones defining the segment. It's based on our analysis. So we define the segments based on our research, through our qualitative research, through our quantitative research, through our secondary research and primary research. That's how we're able to segment the market, is we've already done research. Once we have that learning, then we're in a position to segment the market to divide the market into these segments and to group potential customers. And then we name the segments. We decide what the names of the segments are going to be. So, for example, we could name each one of these age groups whatever we want. That's up to us. So that's why it's so important for us to understand this, because for you to add value in an organization, you need to be able to think critically like this. You need to be able to do this type of critical analysis, because what's going to come out as a result is going to be a significant opportunity for the company. And the way that you're going to segment the market very often is going to be different from the way somebody else is going to segment the market. And that's why we say one of the greatest competitive advantages that a company has is its people. So you're unique. They could hire other people, but there's only one of you, right? So your creative genius, your analytic skills, your critical thinking ability is what's going to be unique in an organization. And that's what's going to help the company to be successful and profitable. Somebody had a question here? Go ahead.
Yeah, can you explain again what is psychography?
Yes, we're going to get to that, but I want to try it. So I gave you an overview of what those ways that we could segment the market. So we're going back now to talk about demographic segmentation, geographic segmentation, and so forth. So we'll segment the market. This is an example of a demographic segmentation. We could segment the market by religion. Now, why is this significant? Now, these types of segmentation that I'm sharing with you, we know as marketers have relevance, have significance. That's why I'm sharing this with you, is because these are certainly, there's a lot of ways that you could segment the market. A lot of different ways. Here are some traditional ways to segment a market that could be very insightful and very compelling, but they're not the only ways. Why does this make sense? What do you think, based on what we said, the criteria that we have for segmenting a market? Why would it make sense to segment a market based on religion?
They'll have similar needs and wants if they're all in the same religion.
Yeah, they're going to have similar needs and wants. A lot of these segments are quite large, and I think I put it in the right order. Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. The last time I checked was about 750 million, which is very substantial. And then there's a few others that actually, in terms of the Jewish population, is only about 14 million. So relative to these other segments, that segment is quite small. But yeah, your point is certainly very well taken. They're going to have similar needs and wants. Like, let's say, for example, Christmas trees. Well, you could, if there's, once we do the market analysis, it's going to be very important to know if 88% of the market is Christian. Then you know you might have a good chance of selling Christmas trees in that market. Now, there might be other manufacturers of Christmas trees, but if it's 88% Muslim, that's a problem, right? Muslims are not going to buy Christmas trees. And I know it sounds like a blinding glimpse at the obvious, but we have to do our research, right? We can't think, oh, well, yeah, I think there's a lot of Christians that live there. Well, we need to know. How many? Is it half the population? Is it 10%? Now, if it's 10%, it might still be worthwhile for us to pursue that opportunity. But we have to go through the analysis.
How general or specific does one want to get in the research department? Like, for example, if I was selling a golf product, right, and would I advertise in a golfing magazine, or would I rather just a general sports magazine, something like that?
I would do both, because remember, our challenge is to reach the target market. So the Golf Digest, for example, I would like to think that that would be one of our first choices to run a print ad. But I think you raise a good point that even in a magazine that's what you consider to be a general sports magazine, I still think you might find maybe, let's say, 25% of the readership that would buy golf products. I'm just saying, it could be 15%, depending on the particular magazine. And then that's what media planners spend a lot of time doing. That's why media planners work 90 hours a week, trying to determine which group of magazines, for example, is going to provide the highest level of reach and at an efficient rate. So some magazines might, the profile of a given magazine, only 50% of the readership might be a match with our target market. But in some categories, in some markets, that's actually a lot. So you have to determine which magazines. And that's why, like for example, I could tell you in some magazines, like let's say Better Homes and Gardens. Better Homes and Gardens is not a sports magazine, but just for example, has a circulation of about 7.5 million, which is a lot. It's really a lot. It sounds like a small number because with television, we're always thinking about reaching 200 million people during the Super Bowl. But for print, actually 7.5 million, a circulation of 7.5 million is is an indication that that magazine has one of the highest levels of circulation. Not the highest, but certainly one of the highest. And a full page color ad for 1 month, right? So one insert is almost $400,000. So you think, $400,000, I always hear them talking about spending $50 million on an advertising campaign. Yes, $400,000 times 12 months is what? Almost $5 million. And then one magazine is definitely not enough. I can tell you from my own professional experience, generally we advertise in 10 to 12 magazines. So now went from what? $400,000 a month to now you're talking about spending, if you were just to spend in print, right, you could easily spend $30, $40, $50 million. Now, mind you, other magazines that have less circulation are going to charge less for a full-page ad. So some of them might be $300,000, some might be $200,000, some might be $100,000, $50,000. Yes, go ahead.
But for that magazine, yes, there's 7 million subscribers and viewers of it, but isn't it a very wide base? Like, how do they know how to corner that market? Who are they advertising to in that case? Because there's going to be so many different types of people reading that magazine. Right,
so absolutely. So one of the challenges in advertising is that there's waste. That we're reaching people who are not in our target market or are not part of the target audience. What media planners do is try to minimize the waste. But, for example, one of the former executives at Procter & Gamble, which you know is a very successful marketer of consumer products, one of their former executives said, this is like maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but it's so relevant to your point. He said, I know that 50% of my advertising budget is wasted. The problem is, what you just said, I don't know which 50%. Now, that's just a realization of the market, right? You're right, but it's not perfect efficiency. We know that we're reaching some of the target audience, but we also know that there's people who's reading the magazine who are not part of our target audience. So we're going to try to pick the magazines that have the best CPM, cost per thousand, and those that are going to reach a greater percentage of our target audience. But in some cases, we have to use a publication that is going to reach people that are not in our target audience. That's one of the, certainly the disadvantages of advertising on television is, yes, of course, you're going to reach a lot of people advertising on television, but you're going to reach a lot of people that are not in your target audience. So if you sell soda, for example, then television would be a good way to advertise, whether it's during the Super Bowl or any other time. Because pretty much, you would like to think that everyone is your target market. That certainly would be the aspirational goals of Pepsi or Coke, although there's quite a few people who don't drink soda. But those non-users, maybe they would try the product. So those are examples of demographic segmentation. We could also segment the market by geography. Go ahead.
Do any of these ever overlap that gets that specific in trying to target like a very specific section of the market?
Overlap in which way? So in other words, they're
religion, age,
they're Christian
gender,
and between the age of 25
and the
to...
gender and the,
Yeah, so what we want to do when we say our target market, that's a good point. When we talk about our target market and defining our target market, well, that's what that means. So in other words, if somebody says, who is our target market? You should say, our target market is men between the ages of 18 and 45 who have at least a high school education and live in the United States and are of any race or religion. So that's all-inclusive. So it says that, yes, they are in that age group, and they could be 28 to 45, but they could also be Hispanic American or Asian American and Caribbean American, and they have high school education. Right, so there's that overlap. Is that what you're trying to say? Is that
right,
they're both?
right.
That they're in that age group, and they're also Jewish, and they have high school education. So and that's fine. That's what we need to do when we define our target market. But then what happens is our target audience, which is who we want to reach with our advertising, is very often a subset of our target market. Do you see why that is? So in other words, our target market, let's say, is all men 18 to 45. But then our target audience, and we're going to have several target audiences, right? That's who we want to reach with our advertising, is we're going to have an advertising campaign that's trying to reach Asian Americans. An advertising campaign that's going to reach Hispanic Americans. An advertising campaign to reach African Americans. So each advertising campaign is going to capture this idea of multicultural marketing, that you want your advertising to resonate with the target audience. It's something that people have got to connect with. Now, let's say you want to sell a product to 18-year-olds. You're not going to have me in the ad. They're not going to want to buy a product that I use. They want to see you guys. They want to see you. Say, yeah, look at him. He's cool, and oh, he looks like a college kid just like me, and he wears $300 sneakers and $250 jeans. So you want to be able to connect with the target audience. So that's why we customize our ad campaigns. And especially in the United States, it's certainly very relevant because the market is very diverse. And the segments are also large. The Hispanic American population in the United States is increasing very rapidly. The Asian American population is increasing very rapidly. African Americans in the United States are approximately 12%, which is what? That's more than 35 million people. That's a pretty big segment. That makes sense to customize a advertising campaign that African Americans can connect to. Is that right? Do you guys agree? Does that make sense? And then, for example, let's say for Hispanic Americans, you're going to advertise in magazines that are read by Spanish-speaking Americans, and you're going to advertise on TV stations like Telemundo, for example, that run programming in Spanish. So that's what they want to see. That's what the customers want to see. Is that what you guys want to see when you're purchasing a product? You want to see an ad that's representing your lifestyle, or maybe it's aspirational, so it's representing the lifestyle that you desire.
How important is it to market to groups within different demographic, for example, like all the different Jews that come from different backgrounds?
Yes, I think the more specific, the more compelling. So the better that you could customize the ad so that a specific subsegment will connect and relate to the ad better and ultimately purchase the product, I think that's ideal. And that's why I drew a distinction between what is very often referred to as African American, but then you also heard me use the term Caribbean American. So those are two very different cultural groups, right? Although generally in terms of skin color, often they're referred to as blacks. But their culture is very different. It's very different from somebody who's grown up in Mississippi down south and somebody whose family moved here from Jamaica 15 years ago. So it's a very different culture, and it means that their needs and wants are going to vary in a variety of ways. If there's similarities, then that's okay. There might be some similarities for certain products, and other products there could be differences. So for example, the food. There's definitely very different food and delicacies that are preferred by Caribbean Americans and not so much African Americans. But there could be other products where the needs and wants are similar, like for example hair care. And I know you like to think, what does this guy know about hair care? But I know a couple of things. I know what shampoo is. I know you're thinking shampoo. Do you follow what I'm saying? You see, does that make sense? Oh, you got it now. He just got it. Okay, good. Go ahead.
How would you appeal to a variety of people, right? Let's say you want to sell a product that anyone can use, and it's applicable to anyone's life over the age of 18 and below the age of probably retirement. How do you appeal to anyone like that? Because you're talking about every single sub-segment or subdivision, everything.
And so what you need to do is communicate to each group with a different marketing communications plan. So this idea of like one size fits all, I don't recommend that. So I know what you're trying to say. How do we sell to all religions, all age groups, all ethnicities? It's challenging to do that because whatever it is that you do, there's going to be some groups that are going to connect better with the commercial and our product and service than others. Even if you use animation, like look at what Geico has done. So they said, you know what, we're not going to show a Hispanic, we're not going to show an Asian, we're going to show a gecko.
A caveman.
Right? Or a caveman. And we're not going to tell anybody his religious beliefs, right? Or associations, right? Leave that to your imagination. We're not saying he's an atheist. We're not saying that the gecko is Jewish or Christian, but that's something that's TMI, too much information. We're not going to share that. But then you say, oh, well, coach, why not? That sounds like a good idea. We'll use the gecko, and wouldn't everybody relate to that? But what about humor? What everybody considers to be humorous is going to vary from culture to culture. Maybe in some cultures they find that very amusing, and other cultures not. Maybe in some cultures they find that offensive.
Gecko?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they think that they're mocking the gecko, and that's maybe somebody's pet. They're offended by that. So you have to think about that carefully, but I think that's a good example of where they're trying to sell car insurance. But you know what, importantly, think about this. They're trying to sell car insurance, but not to everybody. Why? Why would I say not to everybody?
They also have cars.
Exactly. So now what about you run this ad like they do, and please don't tell me that a big company did it, that makes it right, because big companies make big mistakes. But certainly they advertise on television, but like Alexi is saying, well, everybody doesn't own a car. So what about all those people that are being exposed to that television commercial who don't own a car and don't have a need for car insurance? That's waste. That's what the president of Procter & Gamble was saying. I know, but what could I do? Alexi owns a car, and Shlomo doesn't. What could I do? They're both watching the show at the same time, the same day of the week. So it happens. What we want to do is try and minimize the waste. So we talked about demographic segmentation, age, gender, race, religion. Let's talk about geographic segmentation. So geographic segmentation could be based on region. So the idea is that we believe that people who live in a certain region have similar needs and wants and are going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way, are reachable, and the segments are large.
Giant fans.
But don't you think we also can include here like culturally wise, like because it's geographically different parts of the world and countries, it's also cultures, different cultures. So, like, how does the cultural differences fit in there? Or it's part of
What, in terms of regional?
Yeah, like geographic segmentation would also be cultural segmentation in certain sense.
Oh, so absolutely. So maybe this is not relevant for the particular product or service that we want to sell. So you guys got what Alexi is saying? He's saying, well, in North America, we have the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
Good.
What was that? Does that make sense for the product or service that we want to sell? Maybe what Alexi is saying is, you know, that in Mexico, right, the culture is very different than, let's say, in Canada or in parts of the United States. Although there's a lot of Spanish-speaking people in the United States, the language you speak does not always indicate a common culture. Because there are people speak Spanish all over the world, and the cultures are very different. And also the Spanish, the dialect of Spanish, is very different. So Alexi brings a good point. So maybe this is not appropriate for our product. North America, South America, Latin America, etc. Or if we look at, let's say, Asia, for example. So we have Korea, Japan, China, just for example. Wow, but I mean, yes, they're Asian, but certainly there's vast differences in the culture there, in each of those countries. So maybe this is not the best segmentation. Maybe we need to look at, instead of at the region level, maybe if we're focusing on that region of the world, then maybe we take it to the next level and we focus on specific countries. China, which has 1.3 billion people. India, which also has about 1 billion people. Japan, Korea. And by the way, what I just did, you see what I just did here? By quantifying the population, that's referred to as market sizing. Right? What I just did is quantify the size of the market by saying that 1.3 billion people live there. It could be in dollars, it could be per capita income, it could be the number of people. But we want to know, once we segmented the market, the size of each segment.
Do we prioritize because of that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to look at after we've identified these segments is which ones are the largest, which have the greatest level of expected growth, we're going to look at the concentration, of the market. So the size, the growth rate. Remember we talked about the Boston Consultant Group model? Remember? We talked about portfolio analysis, and we talked about the stars, the cash cows, the dogs, not to be confused with dinosaurs, and the question marks, right? So the size of the market is important, the rate of growth, the concentration of the market. So in other words, what percentage of the market is controlled by, let's say, 5 competitors? So in other words, is the market highly concentrated? Or is it highly fragmented? So a market that's highly concentrated, for example, is wireless communication in the United States. So basically in the United States, what do we have? Like 4 companies that control literally about what? 90% of the wireless communication in the United States. The largest is AT&T, then Verizon, then Sprint, and T-Mobile. Right? Aren't those the 4 largest competitors? So that's very different from a market in which you have 100 competitors make up 90% of the market. If 100 competitors make up 90% of the market, then what? That's highly fragmented versus highly concentrated. That's going to have an impact on how we view the level of market attractiveness. So we need to take that into consideration. Also, Michael Porter has a model, a market attractiveness model known as 5 forces. And the 5 forces model looks at some other aspects, such as the level of rivalry. So the level of rivalry is an indication of how attractive the market is. So if the level of rivalry is very high, then the market is less attractive. Threat of substitutes. If the threat of substitutes is high, then the market attractiveness is low. So for example, if we sell milk in a particular market, then what would we be concerned about?
Other milk sellers?
And
Orange juice.
orange juice, right? That's an example of a threat of a substitute, that people might drink milk produced by other farmers, other dairies, other branded milk products, but also a substitute would be juice, or maybe soft drinks, or maybe water. It depends. That's something that we need to understand from a consumer behavior perspective. In a given market, there's no right or wrong answer. It's only what consumers say is, if there was no milk, I would drink orange juice, or I would drink soda.
Isn't another way around that like what PepsiCo does, in that they own the milk company and the orange juice company?
So a company like Pepsi and Coke, they operate in multiple segments in the beverage category. So absolutely. So Pepsi owns a variety of soft drinks, right? They have a portfolio of soft drink brands, including Pepsi, Sierra Mist. What else is theirs?
Powerade.
Orange,
No,
Crush,
Gatorade.
Gatorade. They own Starbucks brand.
So Pepsi is the cola brand. Sierra Mist is the lemon lime, and
Yeah.
Crush.
Oh, crap.
so they have an orange flavored soft drink. But to your point, they also own Aquafina, which is a brand of water. And what about juice? Do they own a juice company?
Minute Maid.
Well, Minute Maid, I think, is Coca-Cola.
I think they might own Tropicana.
Yeah, they might. I think they finally did acquire Tropicana, didn't they?
PepsiCo
Yeah, Tropicana.
owns all those drinks: Frito-Lay, Tropicana, Quaker, and Gatorade.
Gatorade. Tropicana is from
And then
Pepsi.
Frito-Lay is like all those chips. Tropicana is Everjuice, Quakers.
Right. So, but I think Coke had taken the lead with its Minute Maid brand for a long time, and then Pepsi emulated them and realized that it was relevant in terms of the way they were viewing, the way they segmented the beverage category, that owning a juice company, an orange juice company, it's made strategic sense to them. But both of them are very adamant that they don't want to sell alcohol. Now in the US, 60% of the dollar sales in the beverage category are alcohol. So in the US, the beverage category each year is about $200 billion at retail each year. $120 billion is sold as alcohol. And the other 80 billion is soft drinks, water, juice, teas.
It's quite interesting though that by Coke or Pepsi diversifying, owning the milk and the orange juice company per se, they're not competing with themselves, but they're competing with now Coke. And since everyone is now diversifying, they're all just competing with each other rather than within the different categories.
Yes, it's very interesting to think about who are your direct competitors and who are your indirect competitors. And they might be competing within the organization with themselves. Now, why would you do that? Because if you now own an orange juice company and you are known for selling soft drinks, and that could be what people perceive as being a substitute, then maybe your Pepsi sales are going to go down. But the logic is that if we don't cannibalize, because remember, anytime we introduce a new product, we want to achieve incremental sales. We want to have incremental revenue. We don't want to just replace sales. But in this case, we're not talking about incremental revenue. We're talking about just the opposite, which is cannibalizing our sales. That means, for example, we might sell less Pepsi and sell more orange juice. And the reason is because if we don't cannibalize our own sales, somebody else will. There is a cost of doing nothing. Don't think that doing nothing is the safe decision. It's not. So just because you say, you know what, I'm not going to acquire an orange juice company because that's going to cannibalize the sales of my soft drink business. Well, that doesn't prevent orange juice from cannibalizing the sales of your soft drink business.
Yeah, but they're also just reaching a whole nother market also. People just drink orange juice and not soft drinks, so it could be profitable, not take away from the other sales.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a good idea in terms of expanding their business. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. You know, like they say, if you can't beat them, join them. So if you know that one of the substitutes is orange juice, so then why not also sell orange juice? You don't want to have this, remember the first day we talked about the difference between a marketing orientation and a production orientation. Production orientation means that we make what? We try to sell what we could make. Whereas the marketing orientation is we make what we could sell. Remember we talked about that distinction? We said the marketing orientation is focused on making what we could sell. So it's not just because we have a soft drink bottling capability that we're just going to produce soft drinks and just try to sell as much of that as we can. That's a production orientation. The marketing orientation says we're going to find out what customers want. And what we found out, and what, without even doing in-depth analysis, just walk into any grocery store, you'll see that there's a need for different types of beverages. Soft drinks, juice, water, tea, etc.
You said PepsiCo is adamant on not going to the alcohol industry. Why is that?
Focus. At one time, diversification. Now there's two types of diversification. Related diversification and unrelated diversification. So if you're a soft drink company and you acquire a bottled tea business or orange juice, that's considered to be a related diversification. Now what companies did in the 70s, which was considered to be very common, were any of you born? Were any of you alive in the 70s? I don't even think so. All right, maybe that was a bad example. But anyway, in the 70s, right, which was like at the dawn of time, basically, right? In the 70s, companies were focused on unrelated diversification. So you would have, for example, cigarette companies buying food manufacturers.
Philip Morris.
Exactly. So R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. That's pretty bizarre. What did you think? You have retailers. Remember we talked about Sears, that they acquired an insurance company, Allstate. They acquired a brokerage firm, Dean Witter, and Discover Financial Services. What does that, I mean, you're a retailer. And at that time, or just prior to that, they were the nation's largest retailer. What business do you have owning an insurance company? Your stock and trade is retail. But that was very common. News companies owning theme parks and alcohol companies and so forth. But there's some advantages to being diversified that way, and there's also some disadvantages. And the biggest disadvantages, or one of the biggest disadvantages, is lack of focus. It's this idea that you can't be a jack of all trades. If you're a retailer, be the best at retailing. But you can't be a retailer, right? It's very challenging to be an effective retailer, to be an effective merchant, and also run an insurance company and a brokerage firm and a credit card business. Or like some of these other companies, I mean, there's a lot of examples of these conglomerates that were formed. Companies that own, like General Electric, for example, still today is a very large conglomerate and has a very diverse holdings. They've been very successful. It doesn't mean that some companies can't be successful with diverse holdings, but the reward on Wall Street, if you will, is on companies that are focused. And they believe the more focused, the more profitable the company is going to be. So the paradigms shift, but that's the way the market is today. All right, so we talked about demographic, we talked about geographic, and what else? What else did I mention? Psychographic. Psychographic is about lifestyle. Lifestyle and personality. So when we segment the market by lifestyle, that means that we believe that a certain lifestyle has similar needs and wants, and that they're going to respond to the marketing mix in a similar way. Like, for example, what would be an example of a lifestyle? Somebody mentioned before, they said, what about if you're pregnant? Didn't one of you guys ask that? Do I look like I'm pregnant? People always ask me, when is the baby coming? And also they said that, well, you know, if things don't work out for you, you know, Christmas is coming, they're always looking for Santa Claus on 34th Street, so keep your options open. But I told him, I said, I could never do that. Santa Claus had hair, right? Lots of it. So in terms of lifestyle, there's golf. Yeah, golf is certainly different types of sports, but also your life stage. So for example, married with kids. So like life stage would be single, married, married with kids, and then we have what's called empty nester. What does that mean, empty nester?
Okay.
Right, when you finally get the kids out of the house, right? So what this says is that people who are single, right, and we're talking about lifestyle, people that are single have similar needs and wants, and are going to behave to the marketing mix in a similar way. Is that everybody who's single? No, it's not. But remember, we're looking for ways to segment the market that are going to help us to operate efficiently and to be profitable and maximize our sales. So maybe this is not the best way to segment the market for our product and service. Married, same assumption. Married with kids, empty nesters. So those are different life stages. Go ahead.
So like Gerber, they sell life insurance, but they sell babies life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So is that them segmenting the market away from another baby food company where they're just selling baby food? With Gerber, you are getting your baby food and, you know, getting the, you know, your kid needs insurance.
Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that what they did is they identified the market as life insurance.
As baby food.
Right, I know. Gerber is the one that sells the insurance. But what I'm saying is that they segmented the market, the life insurance market. And they said that there's different segments. There's babies who need insurance. There's teenagers that need insurance. And then adults within different age groups that are going to need insurance. So I think the way they're looking at the market is smart, because they took this huge market, life insurance, and they said, this is the way we're going to break down the market, and we're going to target, right, when we're targeting, what we're doing is selecting a segment or multiple segments, we're going to focus on this segment. The segment for life insurance for babies. Yeah, I think that's compelling. Now, whether or not they decide to target these other segments is, a different business model, but I think that them focusing on this segment is also relevant to their brand. So in other words, when we brand a product or service, we have to think about whether or not it's logical to brand that product or service with that particular brand. So we have to look at the brand elasticity. How far could we stretch our brand? Now, Gerber, as you were suggesting, is a very well-known marketer of baby food. So Gerber, for most people, means baby. So you could extend their brand, the Gerber brand, into a lot of different categories that relate to babies. Baby food, baby insurance, I think a lot of other categories. But maybe Gerber jet skis, maybe that doesn't, there's not a logical connection there. So I think this is really smart because they realize that their brand can be extended into life insurance, but it's very relevant specifically to life insurance for babies. Yeah, I think it's very smart what they did.
I think what Gerber's doing, they also have a college fund type of thing that they set up from when they're babies. This way, by the time they're teenagers, like us, I guess, or 21 or whatever.
So what you're saying is you're teenagers and I'm 21? Is that what?
No, I'm 21, but like,
oh, okay.
Like in general, whatever. You know what I mean. So like in general, like the average teenager, college life is 18 to 22, I'd say. And so from day one, they're basically targeting each group, meaning babies or baby food, teenagers for college, and adults to pay for, I guess, the college and the baby food. And then their marketing pitch would most probably be towards those adults at the current moment, just based on who's paying for the product, and who's like raising their loved one, I guess, their kid. So. Yeah.
And so, tell me more about the tuition, the program that they created. They're contributing towards the scholarship.
Yeah, from what all I really know is from the commercials that they say, like they had this whole like family discussion and saying how like I already started a college fund and like they just like put diapers on the baby basically. So like that's the type of thing. Like from what I assume they're putting Gerber puts a percentage of their whatever that person buys into the college fund, or actually probably whatever their profits are. In the end, percentage goes into whoever signs up for their college fund program.
And so what did we say that would classify as last class? We talked about this. What is that? Why are they doing that? What are they trying to...
Social responsibility.
Right. Corporate social responsibility. That's a good example. Right? Basically, they're giving money into a scholarship or some sort of charity. That's a good example of corporate social responsibility. That's the reason why they're doing that.
Payment.
What is it?
It's a monthly payment.
How does so tell us? You found it? What is it?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's a monthly payment that fits your budget, whatever it is.
So does the company, does Gerber put money into the fund?
No, you
No?
don't. The customer does. You decide when you want your money between 10 and 20 years. You receive a guaranteed payment of $10 to $150,000, of 10 grand to 150 grand when your policy reaches maturity.
Wow, so they really are getting into financial services. That's interesting.
So,
I mean,
So they
it makes-
basically
it
are
makes
selling
sense.
annuities.
If they had to stop making baby food, right, they'd have no more source of income. And they have this life insurance plan. And the life insurance plan needs to be backed by some capital. So the only way to guarantee that they'll have that capital to pay that plan is the babies that stay alive for 18 years,
That
get
go
to
to college.
college,
Yeah.
and they swallow all the life insurance money that they don't need to pay out, and that goes to the college fund.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so it's a good example. Maybe we'll have a chance to revisit that in another class. It sounds like an interesting company to study. Before we go, I just want to touch upon this. I don't want to rush it, but just to give you some insight, we'll talk about this again next class, about behavioral segmentation, which has to do with usage rate, and another example is product benefit. So let me just tell you this quickly, and then we'll start with this next time. But in terms of usage rate, we have heavy users, moderate, and light. And we'll also talk about product benefit and how that's a significant way to segment a market. So a good example would be toothpaste, for example. What they do is they segment the market by the benefit that the customer wants. So for example, some customers buy toothpaste because it fights cavities. Others, white teeth. Others, fresh breath. Others, fights plaque, etc. All of those are compelling ways to segment the market. All right, before you go, what I want to do is give you this sheet, which is a review of Chapter 1.